what's going on? It's Stokely from Sauce on Delay. I'm going on broader topics, just even non-related to hair care. But like I said, taking care of your hair is a holistic journey. It's not just isolated. I mean, there's isolated medicines like minoxidil, finasteride. Minoxidil is not known to have any side effects, but finasteride has side effects. And then you got alpha tradol, which is a topical also. I don't know about the side effects of alpha tradol, but what I want to talk about is what's the big deal with GMO, right? So, and organic. What does GMO and organic? What do they all mean? So GMO refers to the genetic modification of the plant, of the food. Whether it's the original naturally germinated from the beginning of time, or naturally pollinated over time, or is it a splice of DNA from other plants, humans, all kind of things like that? Because they have tomatoes with human DNA mixed in, But I'm from a rural community originally, and we used to do a little bit of genetic modification. What we used to do is, because oranges, the orange trees, the fruit trees that produce orange trees, they used to suffer from a disease, but then there were some other orange trees that were sour, that were not sweet oranges, that did not suffer from that disease. So what we would do is we would germinate both seeds, germinate a sweet and germinate a sour. And what we would do was cut the sweet and cut a little splinter or a little branch. Just put a slit in a branch on the sour orange tree and stick the sweet orange stalk, like seedling, and wrap it, and then put some dirt around it and wrap it again. So what would happen was the sweet orange would graft itself into the body of the sour orange and grow from there. So now it had attributes of both plants. It had the resistance to the bacteria and the fungus. It had resistance to the disease because it had the sour orange lower body, or it had the sour orange's DNA, and it also produced sweet oranges because it had the sweet orange DNA. So you got the best of both worlds. You got the disease, the resistance to disease, and you got the sweet fruit that everybody wants to eat. So that's a little bit of splicing, you could call it. But the only thing is, when this plant reproduces, you get a sweet orange seed. You don't get a combination of both. So genetically modified organisms that have been developed in the lab and been spliced, when they reproduce, they either reproduce with no seeds at all, or they reproduce their own genome, their own genetic sequence all over again. Another genetic modification, you could call it, is having a horse mate with a mule, having a horse mate with a donkey. When a horse mates with a donkey, it produces a mule. That mule, from my understanding, is born sterile, right? So that meal can't even reproduce. So now we have, I've seen posts recently online where people encourage not to eat seedless foods, not to eat seedless grapes, not to eat seedless oranges, no seedless stuff, because that's genetically modified. Now, what does organic mean? Now, organic means that no pesticides are used a certain amount of days before the fruit or the vegetable is harvested. So organic doesn't mean that they're not using pesticides and chemicals. It just means that they stop using them for a certain amount of time before the harvest. So, it sounds like a nice word, organic, but ultimately it's not even all that great. It would be even better if they used no pesticides at all. But that's almost impossible because there's birds flying around, there's insects flying around, there's all kind of things going on that want to eat the plants and eat the fruits and stuff like that. So having a totally a plant totally grow without any pesticides is kind of difficult. Now, some people have natural pesticides, which like things like ladybugs and stuff like that. You can use ladybugs to get rid of the aphids. You can use different kind of things, and then now they even have hydroponic growing, which you can get some organic growing that way without pesticides, because you're growing the plants indoors, climate controlled. All the vermin are neutralized, so you can get some clean food that's totally organic that way, and that doesn't require a whole bunch of pesticides. But it's also grown in artificial light. But you can also grow it in a greenhouse, and you can control those pests also. So anyhow, GMO is genetically modified organism. Organic means that pesticide use was ended a certain amount of days before harvest. So that's what's going on. But it's up to you to determine what you want to do, because especially nowadays when we have inflation and food is so expensive, it's hard to try to eat these foods which have a markup due to the marketing. You know what I mean? They're really, when they stick the GMO on there, or when they stick the organic on there, they're really trying to get your dollar. They're really trying to convince you of why you need to pay a premium for this product. So, and who knows how much the dosing is. We have pesticides such as glyphosate, which is associated with so many different things, including cancers and stomach ulcers and all kind of stuff like that. So, we have to make a decision and be as informed as we can be about what we're eating. And I can't even advise either way, because you have to make a compromise between affordability and your long-term sustenance. Maybe later on, when you can afford it, you get yourself some non-GMO organic food. But when you can't afford it, then you just get whatever is available, and you survive. Or ideally, you grow your own food. But I just wanted to touch on GMO and organic and what's that all about. Thanks. Hey, I went in long-winded about what's organic and GMO mean, but I didn't talk about why you should care, right? So why you should care regarding organic is pesticides are poison. Pesticides are used to kill pests, pests, like aphids, grasshoppers, locusts, crickets, worms, stuff like that. Things that want to eat the plants, eat the leaves, stuff like that. So pesticides are used to kill, like the living organisms, And then you have herbicide. Herbicide is to kill plants, but we're talking about plants, so you would use a pesticide. So these pesticides now can poison you. There's if you look at the produce industry depends very heavily on migrant farmers, and a lot of migrant farmers their children suffer from birth defects, and they suffer from health condition, health negative, bad health, poor health, as a result of interacting, picking the fruits and spreading fertilizer and spreading pesticides and things like that. Now, why that's pesticides, that's organic. Organic is related to what is pesticide use. Now, GMO. Why is GMO a problem? Well, humans have been evolving right alongside fruits, vegetables, plants, trees, all these things. Of course, many of these plants, fruits, vegetables, trees are not edible or not safe for us to eat, but through generations and generations and generations, humans have learned what things to eat. Our stomachs have accommodated things to eat. Some of us are genetically predisposed not to eat some of these things. Like, I can't really eat peanuts. I don't know if that could be genetic. That could be maybe my gut biome is off. But these genetically modified organisms don't interact with our bodies in the same manner as the original, what people would call heirloom plant DNA. So we want to eat foods that humans have been growing alongside for millennia. That way our body can digest it as it's been acclimated to digest it, etc., etc., etc. Now something even more scary, or two things that are more scary, is some corporations have genetically engineered pesticides into plants, right? Genetically engineered pesticides into the plant. So now, while the plant is growing, it's oozing out certain chemicals that keep plants away or keep insects away. Our body's not designed to handle that kind of stuff. So, that's not good. What was the next thing? Sometimes they mix human DNA, and I just mentioned that there are potatoes that have human DNA mixed in. They have, I was watching a documentary once. They had a goat producing milk that they had spliced its DNA with a spider in order to make a new version of Teflon. Now, imagine that genetically modified goat that was spliced with a spider now mates with another goat, and that gets away and just starts to spread throughout the genome of goats. It's not going to be a good thing. We can't drink that goat's milk anymore. But when it comes to plant germination, I mean, a goat's not going to travel across the seas, and the way how animals are farmed, they don't really get to mate freely like that. So that's something that can be controlled. But for instance, let's say you're growing a cornfield and nearby someone else is growing a genetically modified cornfield. When the bees land on the blossoms or the flowers, I don't even know if corn have flowers, but hey. So when the bee flies over onto the genetically modified plant, takes its pollen, bring that pollen to the reproductive organ of your corn, the flower, and those genetically modified sperm, I don't know what they call them, pollen. Yeah, pollen. Pollen is sperm. Pollen is like plant sperm. Okay? So the bee takes that plant sperm, puts it in your plant. Now your plant is producing genetically modified, tainted DNA that was not our original DNA. And there's been lawsuits over these things because there's companies that have proprietary ownership over DNA that they have sequenced, that they have created. And if your farm starts growing it starts to grow plants genetically identical as a result of cross-pollination, if you start growing that, then you might be in some legal trouble because they have they have a patent on that plant's DNA. Have you ever heard anything crazy like that? Oh, it's crazy, right? Maybe it's not so crazy. How can you own a plant, right? Well, they own the plant because this DNA is unique. It's not naturally occurring. It's something that was synthesized in the lab. There's a process. And then there's a novel creation, supposedly novel. It's not really novel. So, we don't want to eat genetically modified things for our health because some of them, like I said, their structure, what makes them is not something that our body has grown to accept. And we don't want to eat GMO off principle because it's encouraging this proprietary ownership of DNA. It's also responsible, and you can look this up, for the death of many farmers who have to purchase proprietary seeds, and they are so expensive that they go into debt as a result. And this happened a lot in India, and it's something to be looked into. Something it's very interesting. It's very sad. So for moral reasons, for principle, we don't really want to consume genetically modified foods. I mean, like I said, it might be unavoidable in some cases. And sometimes you don't know because it doesn't say. This person is driving the wrong way. So now, pesticides. I already spoke about that. I lost my train of thought because this person was driving down the road the wrong way. So what was I saying? Oh my gosh, the pesticides. The pesticides and the GMO. So the GMO is bad off principle. It's also not good for you because your body's not designed to manage it. The stuff that's filled with The stuff that's filled with pesticides, you don't want that, because that'll make you sick also. That'll cause birth defects and all kind of stuff like that. It's made to kill plants. It's made to kill animals. So you're a plant. You're an animal. You don't want to eat something that kills animals and insects. You're not too far from the insects. So that's why it's important. That's why it's important of principle, of practicality, etc., 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 etc. Thanks for listening.